Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I am going to share with you my ranking of the Gen 2 Total Drama characters. This ranking is mainly just how I feel about the characters, and things such as personality will play a role in my choices. I will rank the characters from 13 to 1, with 1 being the best, and as the list goes on, I'll have more and more to say about the highly ranked characters, and a little less to say about the lower ranked characters. These characters are obviously not as loved in the community as the original Gen 1 characters, and although I agree that the original characters will always be the best, this second wave of characters were still pretty good, and Revenge of the Island is a pretty great season as a whole. If the Gen 2 character is in All-Stars, this will affect their ranking for the better or for the worst, but unlike most fans, I enjoyed All-Stars, so this shouldn't affect their ranking too much. With all this being said, let's just jump right into the video and let me know if you agree or disagree with my ranking. In 13th place, aka last place, I have someone that shouldn't surprise you at all, and that would be Staci. Staci is a character that's meant to be a first boot, and a character that you don't care for, and that's exactly how I felt. Staci is a character that talks on and doesn't know when to stop, which deeply annoys the other contestants and Chris. Staci is also the first character introduced to the toxic marshmallow, so that's something at least. Talking a lot is one thing, hell, that's what I'm doing right now, but Staci would constantly talk, even during intense moments, and she would lie. Her talking points consisted of claiming her ancestors invented things, or came up with something, which was all just flat out lies in hopes to gain some popularity. It just felt like a competition like this isn't something she would last long in, and that's exactly what happened. I didn't really care for this character, and neither did the show. In 12th, I have Anna Maria, and until editing this video, I thought her name was Anna Maria, but I was wrong. Goes to show how much I care about this character. To be honest with you, this character was pretty forgettable. She was mean, liked attention, and used hairspray and spray tans a lot. Am I watching Total Drama here, or am I watching the Jersey Shore? I mean, that's what it looked like to me. I remember she likes Mike's personality of Vito, and that's about it. I thought her elimination was unique, as Ezekiel, who was this feral creature, now develops feelings for her, and offers her a large quote-unquote diamond, which she gladly accepts, obviously. After all is done, Brick was eliminated this episode, but Anna Maria joins him, saying she quits and is going to cash in the diamond for a large fortune. Right before Chris launches the catapult, he reveals that the diamond is fake and worthless, but it's too late for her as she is launched away. I know some people like this character, and I could have probably said a little bit more about her, but in all honesty, like I said, I find her forgettable. And maybe when I rewatch this season, this list could change a little bit and she could be a little higher up, but for now, she's all the way down here, in 12th. In 11th, I have B. I hate to put B here, and although it seemed like he could compete by creating stuff and thinking, this dude simply preferred not to talk. I'll give credit to the show for doing a decent job with this, and he tried to open his mouth to speak once or twice, but he got cut off a few times, like the time he got cut off trying to speak before his elimination. I thought B was a decent character, but did not need to last any longer than he did. And with villains always being around each season, he was just a sitting duck as he couldn't really defend himself. Bro's real name was Beverly, so maybe that's why he didn't talk much, but I guess we'll never know. Moving on here, I got Brick in 10th. Brick is an army kid who appreciates competition and respects order. Brick has a code, which is never leave a cadet behind, and to respect his superiors, which would be Chef and Chris in this case. This guy often competed against Joe as they were both a competitive type, and one of the only things I remember about Brick is that Dawn tells him he doesn't always need to worry about other people, and that he is the type that needs to be dominated, which just sounds a little weird, like, you could have used a different word. So yeah, Dawn called him out that as a man he needs to be dominated. That stuck with me because obviously that's a little outlandish, but also a little funny. Brick was the 6th person to be eliminated, and does not return in All-Stars. I know the fanbase really likes this character, and I feel if he did return, I would definitely have him higher up, but based on him only being around for a few episodes, and never really catching my attention, this leaves him here at the 10th place mark. Brick was a chill dude who didn't cause much drama outside of some competition of Joe, and speaking of Joe, that's exactly who I have in 9th place. Now, Joe isn't a bad character, but it's just a very mid character in my mind. I definitely never hated her, but I never really liked her either. She was kind of just there, and I was okay with that. She was competitive and gave nicknames to most of the other contestants, such as calling Cameron String Bean, and I remember Joe constantly competing with Brick on pointless things such as morning runs. Overall, she was fine in Revenge of the Island, and I would say my favorite thing with Jo is although she has a very tough outer shell, she does like things such as feeling beautiful and finding love. This helps the character feel a lot more real, and the writers don't have her as only a selfish competitor who cares about nothing else. There's also a funny joke when Jo tells Lightning she never kissed a dude, but we'll get to that joke later on. Jo lasted a while in Revenge of the Island, which is fine, and I'm sure diehard Jo fans can add a lot more to this character than what I said. And this is also the first character on the ranking to compete in All-Stars. And in All-Stars, she immediately wants to be the leader of the villains team, and clashes with Heather. This even has Gwen calling Jo the new Heather. Jo wanted Lightning gone in All-Stars and did that successfully, but Jo is voted off one elimination after Lightning. Jo didn't change as a character in All-Stars, and she was fine as a semi-filler character in this season. I had a little bit more than I thought I was going to say about Jo, but yeah, she's just a great average character. Moving on in 8th, I have Dakota. Dakota is the bratty, wealthy blonde girl type, but the writers did a decent job with her. She came to the island to compete, but also get publicity just by being in the show in hopes to kickstart her own show. Most of the time, she had her own paparazzi following her around that Chris would have to shoo away. We learned that Dakota isn't a complete brat, mainly when she was talking to Sam, and she does seem to care about other people and wants to help other people at times. In episode 6, Runaway Model, she's flattered that Sam comes to her for fashion advice, and she tells Sam about the latest fashion, trying to help him win. She learns to enjoy being around other people who she normally wouldn't be around, which is the nerdy gamer type. Dakota goes through a lot this season with having multiple eliminations, being Chris's intern, and becoming Dakota Zoey, which is a mutated monster of herself, as she was exposed to radiation. I personally enjoy characters that return for the most part, such as Ezekiel or Izzy, returning back to the same season after elimination, and this is the same with Dakota. Dakota gets the boot early, and during a future elimination ceremony returns on a hang glider, and Chris is willing to get her to the catapult once again, until Dakota's father calls him. They work out a deal, and now Dakota will be one of Chris's interns for the rest of the season. Chris would make her clean his feet, grab him drinks, and many other things. But the worst for her was to check out the mines and make sure the contestants could survive down there for a few minutes. And although she does return, things such as losing her hair result from the radiation exposure. She then becomes a mutated freak similar to Ezekiel. Reminds me of freaking Fallout with the show going on right now and all the news about that. Radiation, man. People love talking about it. I'm sure many fans hate this with the whole radiation thing, but since it's a cartoon show, I don't mind. For some closure, Sam still finds Dakota to be beautiful, and they end up being together, and that pretty much wraps up Dakota. Instead of just having another mean girl on the show, they gave her a lot of character development and plot for a character who's only in a couple episodes. She becomes a nicer person as a result of the competition, and also becomes a radioactive freak, so you let me know if it's a good trade-off or not with that. You learn a lesson, but you become a mutated monster, so let me know. But yeah, it was cool talking about Dakota, but it's time to move on. Alright, moving on here, I have Sam in 7th. Sam is your Total Drama's take on a gamer. Sam also had this Seth Rogen type voice and would compare his video games to real life. Something I do too, which I don't know if I should admit that, but I do that. It's a nerdy thing to do, but it's fun. Sam on the show quickly gets feelings for Dakota and liked and supported her, even after she becomes mutated. Sam isn't anything close to a villain, and just wants to play his role on the team, although most challenges he isn't very good at. He even says in a confessional that he just doesn't want to be the first one eliminated, which he does achieve. I like on the Runaway Model episode, the Sasquatch snags Lindsay, who is making a cameo this episode, and Sam goes after her for a rescue, and this immediately resembles Donkey Kong. Sam almost saves the day, but runs out of energy in the process of doing so. Sam played his role in Revenge of the Island fine, but in my mind, it's questionable to why he returns in All-Stars. Sam didn't last too long in Revenge of the Island, and I guess the writers wanted a 50-50 split between Gen 1 and 2 characters this season, but my goodness, Harold would have been a far better option than Sam in All-Stars. All I remember from Sam in All-Stars is Mal breaking his gaming device, him being injured a lot, and him causing his team a heartbreaking defeat as he had pieces of pancake in his pockets, just in case if he was exiled to Boney Island again. Part of the challenge was to eat this ginormous pancake, and you had to eat every last bite, so him having some pancake in his pocket means they were disqualified. This was the end of Sam, and although he's kinda high up on my list, that is because he wasn't annoying to watch, and a decent amount of the Gen 2 characters are forgettable. If I was comparing Sam to Gen 1 characters, he would have little chance with most people, but here, in this list, he's alright in my mind. Decent Gen 2 character, okay character as a whole in the entire show if you're comparing everything. There you have it. In 6, I have Dawn. Okay, so I am aware that right out the gate, this is going to have people comment about why she's so high up. I know Dawn didn't last long on the show. In fact, she came in 11th. But this is a rare character that has the what if she returned in another season type deal. I feel if Dawn returned, she would place much better and add a lot more to the show. But I'll get into some things we saw from the short amount of time she was on the show, and the short amount of time she was here, and why she makes it to 6 on my list. So diving into this character some more, I'm sure Dawn Simps are glad to see Dawn in 6, and no, I don't have her here for that reason. The reason I have Dawn higher up than some might expect is her ability to read people's auras. To me, this was such an interesting thing to watch, as she essentially had superpower abilities. Some examples of this was already knowing Zoey was an only child, telling Dakota her search for fame is a depressed cry for love, having a feeling that the longer Dakota is on the island, the worse her fate would become, knowing Scott wasn't held enough as a child, figuring out Mike has multiple personality disorder on her own, knowing Brick was teased as a child, and these are just some of the examples, but this list makes Dawn very interesting. Having the ability didn't really help in challenges, but makes for Dawn to be a one-of-a-kind contestant, as everything she said was correct and not just a guess. There are also other glimpses of unexplainable occurrences too, such as in the first episode when all the contestants are blown off the yacht and have to swim to the shore. She's already at the shore and is dry. Then in the Capture the Flag challenge, she was able to tell what snowballs were dangerous and what snowballs were not, and so on. She also has a deep connection with animals, and many creatures like to just be in her presence as they could sense the good in her. So while not the most competitive contestant ever, this really stuck with me when I go back and rewatch the show or think about the show. It was such a unique and mysterious thing that the writers included so casually. Dawn is one of the few characters that can say what if when talking about a character returning one day. Although, let's be real, these characters ain't returning. We'll be lucky to see a Owen return at this rate. Moving on to 5th, I have Mike. Now, Mike is a very interesting character to say the least, and has a large amount of controversy within the fan base. Spoiler alert, Mike has MPD, which is multiple personality disorder, and I believe it's now called DID for dissociative identity disorder, but correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, please let me know. I think that's the modern day term for it. The show obviously isn't an educational show, and doesn't do much of anything to shed light on this disorder, but guys, come on. It's a TV show called Total Drama. I personally wasn't expecting to be educated on this. I am ranking Mike just from the show point of view and not overthinking it. It's a cartoon, let's not get too worked up. Getting that out of the way, Mike is certainly an interesting character and added a lot to the show with one personality or the other. This was a very interesting choice to add as a trope for a character, but I'll take it. We could argue that Chris, the host with the most, knew about this, and bringing him to the show would cause a lot of drama, because he wants the ratings. But Mike himself is a chill dude and has a thing for Zoey, and they end up dating, but his obstacle is hiding/limiting his other personalities and keeping this a secret from everyone. Now, Mike was thought to have 4 personalities that could trigger under certain things and cause many things to happen in the season, but diving into all that would only make this episode be about Mike and not everyone as a whole, so we're getting to that another time. What I can say here is that each personality brought their own thing to the table, and was okay, I guess, but it's Mike who's a cool dude. Now, I did say 4 personalities, but it's teased in Revenge of the Island and revealed in All-Stars that he's a 5th personality, who is extremely evil. This was a major plot point in All-Stars, and hear me out, I really liked Mal and this story arc. I think if this season was longer, almost everyone would agree. And also, on a side note, it's interesting ranking a person who has other identities, so I guess it's a ranking of a single character as a whole, but it's a little tricky to dive into this. I have Mike high up here on this list partially due to Mal. I thought Mal's arc of breaking stuff and tricking people was awesome. Even the point with Duncan thinking Mike is familiar, but it turns out it was Mal and they were both in juvie together was just really well done and very unique. Mal goes on to eliminate many contestants and gave hard times to others, including Alejandro, And most of the season goes this way, as if they will figure out Mike is Mal or not. Zoey is completely clueless for an extremely long time this season, which is stupid, but it's All-Stars. I also like how Mal has this battle in his own head and has to free his other 4 personalities in hopes of beating Mal, who's taking over him. I thought this was a unique way to see this go back and forth as the episodes go on. You go in his mind, and you go from inside his mind where Mike is and outside his mind as Mal's taking over his body. Mike/Mal makes it all the way to the end against Zoey, where Mike, with the help of the other 4 personalities, succeed in defeating Mal. Not gonna lie, I totally forgot about the reset button, as the personalities feel Mike is the one to be in charge, and by simply pressing a button, this allows Mike to completely get rid of his multiple personality disorder, essentially. And yeah, that's pretty bizarre. Looking back at this, I remember how many people hated this in the community. I think the writers believed having Mike win and being able to do this brought justice to his character. But I know this upsets people, as someone who may have this disorder in real life cannot do this. For a Gen 2 character, Mike wasn't bad and was actually very unique. This character also brought much drama in and outside of the show, so there's that. This was a very hard character to rank and even talk about. I could have added a lot more here, but you guys gotta have school or a job or something, and we can't be here forever. So let's just move on. I'll talk more about Mike in the comments if anyone wants to engage more in this, or in my ranking here with Mike. If you want to talk with the ranking or just the character as a whole, join me in the comments. We'll talk. I'm right here. Moving on after that character full of conversation, I have Scott as 4th. Scott was about an inch away from being 3rd, but I have him here. Scott was this redneck type of contestant, but was also the villain at times. Scott was simply an idiot, but in ways that would make you laugh. Scott's game plan in Revenge of the Island was to sabotage his own team and vote off people he didn't like or thought could compete better than him. Scott ends up getting rid of Dakota, Bee, and Dawn. Scott's beef with Fang, a mutated shark, was pretty funny, as Fang would appear throughout the season to attack and slow down Scott. Scott competed well, as he didn't mind eating gross food and often was sneaky, turning on his own teammates or forming blackmail or doubt, as he blackmails Mike after learning his secret and making Zoey unsure of who to trust. Like other contestants in the past, Scott's antics finally catch up to him. In Eat, Puke, and Be Wary, Scott does well by switching his gross self-prepared food plate with cam rings, and downs the food without puking, giving him an advantage to win the day's challenge. Scott looks to have an easy road ahead, besides the fact Zoey set multiple traps, which Scott happened to encounter, leaving him seriously injured. Scott is then voted out with Fang by his side, ready to harm him some more, and you would think that would be the end of it, but there's a detail the show added that has me dying. In the final, Scott returns, but he's comically injured. What I mean by this is that the contestants get hurt all the time and suddenly heal, but for Scott, some writer must have had beef with him. Scott is in a full body machine, with only his head sticking out and is paralyzed. He can only communicate with a red and green button standing for yes or no. Chris also doesn't care to learn which button means what, as green is clearly yes, but he doesn't care. This injury and return is so over the top, I couldn't help but find it funny. It resembles that one episode of South Park where the group accidentally sets their preschool teacher on fire and she's in a machine just like this. Moving on to All-Stars, Scott was a character many agree was not ruined this season. He was slightly less of a villain, and showed off more of his country ways by loving to eat things such as soil. Scott also forms feelings for Courtney this season, and they make an interesting couple. Duncan and Courtney fans will never financially recover from this, but good for the writers for adding a pretty surprising couple and having it not be total garbage. Once Courtney is voted off, Scott is upset and bested by Mal a short time after. Scott also gets the pleasure of getting beaten up by Fang some more. But Scott's a pretty funny character and proves the second gen had plenty to offer, and the show wasn't a one-cast wonder, although I would argue the show is a two-cast wonder, as Gen 3 is awful, and if I make a list about that crew, they might all be tied for last. But let's move on to number 3. Alright, in the 3rd spot, I have Zoey. Now, Zoey's a pretty safe pick, and I'll admit a pretty basic character, but the show can't have every character be so over the top, and for the most part, Zoey is not. I like Zoey's gimmick of being an only child, and as a person who's excited to join the show to meet some friends, while most of the cast is the complete opposite of that. I like how Zoey's worried when doing something wrong and wants the other contestants to like her. This is something that's relatable and makes her feel more realistic. We also see what she is like at her breaking point, which I'll get to in a few. I find Mike and Zoey's couple to be sweet, and if I remember right, a lot of people find this to be a overrated couple, but Honestly, the show has very few couples that are a miss for me. The relationship ran into some issues, and Mike was sometimes not himself, and his personality Vito kissed Anna Maria, causing issues, but this couple survived this when Zoey learns about Mike's condition and is still open to being with Mike and liking him for who he is. So bonus points for Zoey for that. After being tricked and confused for much of the season, Zoey eventually snaps later into the season, giving her an alternate persona. Chris nicknames her Commando Zoey, and she's much more aggressive and serious now and competes much better while still being kind and helping her friends like Cameron. Overall, good stuff this season, and she comes back to compete again in All-Stars. Now, Zoey in All-Stars isn't awful, but she seems to have lost a few brain cells. Okay, so Mal wasn't revealed until this season, but it takes Zoey forever to catch on. Despite being suspicious of Mike's behaviors and warnings from both Duncan and Cameron, she only feels the need to keep this in the back of her mind, as she feels Mike is still in control. I think even Alejandro warned Zoey, but she fails to realize what he means. Like, come on Zoey, you got 2 villains and your buddy telling you what's up, you gotta take their word for it, it's 3 people telling you. This allowed Mal to dominate this season for a while, and I guess the saying love is blind could be a valid argument for this. I enjoyed Zoey's interactions with Cameron and Duncan this season, with Zoey being friends with Cameron, and Zoey also seeing the good in Duncan, which has Duncan freak out, which is hilarious. And not gonna lie, I think Duncan and Zoey could have made a good couple. I mean, this isn't something I lose sleep over, but I think it could have worked out. Zoey's clueless self makes it all the way to the end, and she finally figured out that Mike is Mal and stops Mal. Zoey wins the season and Mike wins the alternate ending, giving the couple a win-win scenario that many fans probably hate a lot, but I don't mind. Zoey's a pretty good character, and I'm glad she got to interact with some of the Gen 1 characters, and overall she brought a lot of good to the show. In the second spot, I have Lightning. Lightning, a funny villain, sign me up. Lightning is another jock in the series, similar to Tyler, but this jock takes on the common bully role that is associated with the jocks. While picking on weaker opponents and performing well, Lightning says "sh" in front of almost every word, such as "sh-lightning" or "shabam." Lightning, while being dumb, is full of confidence and strength, and admits that he would do better not being on a team and being on a team of his own instead. And honestly, he isn't wrong. The run-on joke of Lightning not knowing Joe was a girl I found pretty funny, especially since they were near each other all the time, and they formed a rivalry as time went on. When Joe reveals she's a girl right before getting hurled off, Lightning was in total shock, and this was just a really funny moment to witness. Lightning is someone who is actually fit for competition, while being strong and selfish. His underlying comedic tone that's unintentional makes his character a lot more enjoyable to watch as well. I enjoy his vow to crush Cameron in the finale, as this sets up the geek vs. jock type finale, but before the competition begins, both Cameron and Lightning get a message of quote-unquote encouragement. What adds to Lightning's character is that his dad doesn't even speak to him directly, and his father bets his championship ring so that Lightning won't lose. It shows that he has a lot of pressure being the son of a superstar athlete and adds a lot to his character and the way he is. It really makes you feel a little sympathy for this villain and jerk, but I do appreciate this last second detail they add in the finale. The challenge is having a battle where the interactions are great between Cameron and Lightning, and when Lightning wins, I liked his quote of saying Lightning can't even stop the lightning when he gets struck with lightning during the fight. To have a competitive, funny villain dominate and win was a great choice. In All-Stars, he returns, but he was simply a filler character. Joe gets Lightning the boot early, and he's flushed away. In the next episode, I like how we see Lightning one last time, as he left a pre-recorded message telling Joe that voting him off was a bad idea. This character isn't All-Star, and although I didn't have an insane amount to say about him, I know for a fact I enjoyed watching him compete and had a few laughs when he was on the screen. And that's what a good character provides for the most part. Lightning is a great character. With one spot remaining, you can tell who's in first place. I have the number 1 spot for Cameron. I don't think too many people hate Cameron, but I remember most people thinking he's mid. To have the weak, nerdy bubble boy find his way to make alliances, surpass villains, and win a season is something I really liked. So I mentioned Lightning winning, but there's the alternate ending, so I'm going to assume he won when I talk about Cameron, so there you go. Some of Cameron's first look at the real world is experiencing Chris's evil ways and seeing mutated animals and even people, but this doesn't lower his spirit and he's fascinated by it. Cameron is also pretty smart, which is needed as he's physically weak, so essentially the opposite of Lightning. It's also nice seeing Cameron make friends with Zoey and Mike, and him being open to helping Mike with his disorder. Cameron Goat made it to the merge both seasons as he was able to compete well enough and had plenty of great moments. Cameron, with friendship, skill, and luck, makes it to the finals, where he faces Lightning. This was almost a David vs. Goliath type deal, as Lightning should be able to beat Cameron pretty easily, but depending on where you watch, Cameron is victorious. Similar to Lightning, Cameron gets a call from his mother in the finale, with his mother saying they'll have to deflate his bubble if he's not able to win the million, which puts extra pressure on him, just like Lightning got extra pressure. I like the little intensity that was added right before the final challenge. It was a good move. In the finale, despite being teased, Cameron is able to build an Iron Man-like suit and is cheered on by practically all the other contestants. Cameron was able to dominate during his last challenge, fighting off mutated monsters, saving his buddies, and even saving Lightning. In the Cameron ring scenario, his final attack was able to knock Lightning down and he wins. What's great about Cameron winning is that he realizes he won't need to live in a bubble anymore, as he now has plenty of experience with life, and he splits the prize money with everyone else, which is very generous and fixes good nature. I also like Cameron in All-Stars. I found the whole Sierra thing with Cameron and Cody to be funny, and Cameron immediately having an obstacle to avoid. This dude literally volunteers for exile to Boney Island to escape Sierra. Cameron also continues his friendship with Zoey and Mike, even when Mike, who was Mal at the time, crushes his glasses. He's there for him, and he's willing to help Mike deal with this any way he can. Cameron couldn't take Sierra and quits the competition, but Chris decides to put Cameron on the villains team, which I thought was really funny and random. Not in a million years you would think he would be here, but here he is. Cameron starts to panic and doesn't really know what's going on as he worries he's becoming a villain, after suggesting that Scott should be used as bait for Fang. Cameron is voted off this episode after Mal rigged the vote unknowingly to everyone else, but he's saved again since Duncan blew up the cottage and was eliminated instead as he was arrested. Cameron now is uncertain who to trust, like I mentioned, and Chris even says he has his money on Cameron getting the boot next. And in another challenge in the near future, Cameron gets seriously hurt, which is a death sentence to competitors on the show, and he's finally booted off. Cameron is the definition of an underdog and got to experience the real world and did better than anyone could imagine. So here's my complete list with reasons why I have each character in a certain spot. Do you like my list? Hate my list? Surprised by my list? Let me know, as I would love to read your comments and your own personal rankings in the comments. Total Drama is a show I love very much, and although I haven't rewatched the show in some time, I think my memory did me well here. I was surprised with how much I could remember. If you made it this far, thank you guys for watching. I'll have more content up soon, and as always, take care.